Theme song for the beer podcast. No, theme song for the gear podcast. I got to start a little somber today, Uncle Leon. R.I.P. Adam Hunter, 2006 West Coast Eagles premiership hero. Pour a little out for the champion. And sorry to start on such a sour note for everybody, but bit of bad news out of West Australia today.
That kind of sucks.
How you feeling,
43, mate? way too young. Yeah, it's made me reflect on where I was when there was the second best grand final play of all time.
Yep.
We all know that the best grand final play of all time is McGovern.
Oh, yeah.
Vardy, Ryan, Sheed, goal.
And,
in a similar fashion, Daniel Chick smothering that kick, I think, off Ryan O'Keefe.
Mm-hmm.
And then Adam Hunter running on to clinch the 2006 premiership for the Eagles. I guess that will always make him an immortal.
Where did you watch that game? Do you remember?
It's at my friend Nick's house, and we watched the grand final there the previous year where the Swans got up by the slimmest of margins.
Mm-hmm.
And, yeah, then the next year, and it was sort of like, oh, no, it's happening again. And then, yeah, that moment was just everyone, like, leaping over couches, and, yeah, it was pretty wild.
Yep. Yeah, I remember the year before watching that. I used to go to LAN parties a lot. That was my thing when I was 17 or whatever. And I remember the year before, the one that they lost, they had it playing on a projector at this big LAN, I'm talking like hundreds of people at this thing. And I watched it, and I was only half interested because at the time I didn't really care that much about footy, but still very upset. And then the next year when they finally got up, same feeling, like, oh no, they're gonna shit the bed again. It's all over. But I was watching at my auntie and uncle's house, and I had to leave in the last quarter to go to work, and I was doing PA work, so I had to load in a PA at Fremantle for some big show. So I remember sitting in my car at the front of the factory, like listening to the radio, because that's how you did it, obviously.
Torture.
And man, they got over the line. You know, Cuzzy gets his medal, Juddy gets his only medal, Kerr, all the boys. You know, Drew Banfield, his one last hurrah. And, good day. So anyway, look, that's about 2.5 minutes of talking about AFL to start the show. How else are you, mate? Like, we've, spoken about fallen heroes, but how's the show going? How's the circus?
Yeah, good. You came and saw it, mate, on what, Friday? Saturday?
Saturday, yeah. I got there a bit late because who knew there'd be not a parking spot to be found unless you wanted to walk about a kilometre, which is probably maybe not a kilometre, but I walked a hell of a long way to get there. But it was really good, man. The show was really fun. Band sounded really good as well, as to be expected. Just quickly, really liked the guitar sound.
No, there you go.
Yeah, it sounded pretty good. It sounded massive actually when I walked in. And yeah, I can't remember what song it was. It was during the girls doing the silk stuff up in the ceiling, and it was all pretty heavy. And
that's probably my favorite song in the set. Like, you guys actually arrived at my favorite part of the set, where it's just like the big cinematic stuff and all the samples and vocoders, and yeah, that's pretty wild, especially when someone's swinging from the ceiling in aerial silks, with like free fall stuff as well. It's pretty wild. But yeah, it's been going good. I had a blocked ear last week, so just not painful or anything, but just frustrating. Just having everything heavily filtered out of one ear, a bit disorienting as well. And last night, having my ears back,
did you just have to get drained?
So good.
Was it drained or infection?
Previously, I have had them irrigated because just wax build-up. It happens all the time with me.
Old waxy ears, Leon Todd is what they call him.
Old waxy toddy, exactly, mate. But yeah, going and getting them irrigated. Normally, the process here is you go to your GP and they say, go and put some softener in your ears, and you have but I've been putting softener in my ears consistently, and they're like, well, go away and do it. So you get kicked down 5 days later, you got to go back in. They pump a bunch of lukewarm water into your ears, and it's look, it's not painful, it's not pleasant though, and it's just not something you want to have done. So I was sick of that. So I found a place that does microsuction. And Troy, let me tell you, I'm never going back to irrigation, even though it was like more expensive to get the suction done. Just worth it. Like, it was all done in it was so much faster. And, you know, you don't have water in your ear, and your eardrum and your ear canal doesn't get like inflamed from having hot water in it blasted around. And it's just very precise. And I walked out of there being able to hear perfectly again, which is great. So last night's show, I was just loving it because I could hear everything again. It was also considerably cooler. It was just it wasn't 44 degrees or however hot it's been a bunch of times last week.
Hot today,
like when you came to see the show, hot in the venue,
oh my
right?
goodness, it was so hot in there, man. Like, I mean, you said it's a giant tin shed and 700 people, 800 people, whatever. It wasn't, it was hot. And then we went out for dinner afterwards to somewhere else that was also very hot. So
and ate some hot and spicy chicken in a hot room.
Yeah, we just a couple of hot boys.
Couple of hot boys,
hot men,
living life,
loving it. Did they pull any giant chunks of wax out of your ear, like solid parts, or was it just all loosey goosey?
Yeah. Did
I tell you I like to watch that on
the
YouTube?
The one that was blocked.
Like,
oh mate, you should get into it.
Oh, it's I don't know if my ears need it specifically. Maybe they do. You know, I'm too scared to get my ears checked because there's going to be a bunch of problems in there, and I just would rather live in bliss. But anyway, sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, heaps of big chunks. They basically, with microsuction, you don't have to put the softener in. So they were like, look, you've put some softener in your ear already. That makes it a bit harder. But they did both ears. So the other one just comes out in chunks. And yeah, hopefully, because there wasn't a bunch of hot water circulating around in my ears, they won't be, because also having water in your ear makes it produce more wax. So hopefully this will get on top of it and it doesn't happen again anytime soon. But yeah, it's also just the way my ears are built. But yeah.
The Ear Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Ear Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Sponsored by Clear Ears.
How expensive was it?
You can hear clear with Clear Ears. It was $100.
Okay. Well, it's worth it.
A non-bulk bill doctor is about $88. And, you know, good luck trying to find a bulk bill doctor, Troy, in this economy.
Well, there you go, mate. You've locked him in.
Yeah, it was considerably more convenient as well. It was just like, look, it's not a bunch of water in my ears. It was, I like booked it the night before and got a 9 a.m. appointment. So it was just, mate, everything's coming up Millhouse.
Mate.
Coming up Millhouse.
One of those. And footy starts soon, mate. It's the it's all happening again, mate. It's all happening. Life's pretty good. Not.
What about you, Troy? What's been keeping you busy?
Well, my son started year 1 today, so we've been preparing for that. That's been a gigantic amount of pain and suffering, but he finishes school in about half an hour. I'm not picking him up, so we'll keep talking, but I will find out how it went, and maybe I'll find out by the end of the episode how it went, but he got there, so that's the important thing. But otherwise, mate, no, things have been good. It's
Stay tuned.
I've been getting through some projects, so that's really good. People are mostly happy, and yeah, man, I mean, it's just the year has started. I mean, it's Feb, so of course it started, but it's funny. It's funny because between around when I finish teaching in like the end of November to when I start teaching, which is about now, like I never really know if I'm working or not. Like I definitely am working, I'm getting paid and I'm doing jobs, but the actual mental side doesn't really tick on until about this time of year. So yeah, thankfully, like a lot of stuff's already happened, and there's a few projects that I sort of put on pause sort of over December, January, which will pick up again probably next week. And yeah, this week and last week has been kind of just getting back into some nerdy guitar stuff, thankfully, which is convenient because we have a platform by which we can talk about it. So how does that make you feel,
That's
mate?
why we're here.
The Here Podcast, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much.
Yep.
So yeah, mate. Well, look, do you want to have a little chat about some capture redos or what?
Yeah. Well, you've been making captures, right? And I've demoed a bunch of capture-based stuff recently. Seems like everyone is getting in on using, you know, sampling, machine learning to have software representations of often analog chains. So we're talking about stuff like the Kemper, the Quad Cortex, ToneX. They're probably the 3 big ones. I did a demo recently with the Mua GS1000, which does capturing. The Headrush Prime, I've got a bunch of videos with. I've got a few more coming with that as well. I made some captures of some of my stuff. Yeah, like everyone, it seems like Line 6 Fractal Audio, and Boss, who are like the big dogs in the modeling world. They're sort of the only ones who haven't released capture-based solutions. And there's open source stuff like Neural Amp Modeler. So, this is not groundbreaking news to anyone, but because you've been making a bunch of captures, I thought it might be cool to talk about how you're doing it, what quirks you found with the process, and kind of why you're doing it.
Well, firstly, if you're interested, I'll just add right off the top, if any of this is of interest to you, my website should be launched hopefully by the time this is out, but if not, very soon after that, and we'll make more of an announcement about it. But yeah, I'm making captures because I intend to have them available for purchase. For anyone that may want to use some of this stuff that's behind me, more so than that as well, not more so, but I'm using ToneX as my platform at the moment because I like the accessibility of it, is probably the best way of saying it. Of all the ones that you sort of, well, I guess like you mentioned the modeling stuff with the Boss and the Line 6 and the Fractal, and that's awesome. And I use all that. I use all those units actually. Oh, sorry, I don't use the Boss so much for the modeling, but yeah, the other two.
But you've got a Boss loop station on your board.
Yeah, yeah. The others, I use them extensively. In the studio, though, having the ability to just have an amp sound come up in terms of how you want it, like the inflexibility of that sometimes is really useful, which is a strange thing to say. And I kind of feel like, we don't need to have a discussion about modelers versus like capturing, but when I'm doing gigs and when I'm trying to get sounds for myself, I find it enjoyable to tweak knobs, and you can do more of that when you've got a modeler. You can really dial stuff into how you like it. But when I'm in the studio sometimes, and I like to just pull up a sound instantaneously if I'm like, for example, I was saying to you before, I did a mix for someone and they sent a bunch of guitars that had been recorded with some plugin, like guitar plugin software, which I didn't really like that much. They also provided the DIs. So it was, in that scenario, easier to click through some profiles or some tones to find what I liked, rather than try and bring up the Axe effects or the Line 6 stuff and dial it in. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, it's all presets, but I do like knowing that it's an actual amp sound that has been like used. And incidentally, with this project, I tried 3 different things. I tried firstly a ToneX profile, a capture that I'd made of my 80A MP1, available soon.
Nice.
And the client didn't like that so much, which was unfortunate because it sounded really fucking close to the reference track that they gave me. I tried the Neural Gojira plugin because I wanted a 5150 sound, and they also didn't like that. So it was like just judging by what the client had said, I tried a few different things. And then in a last-ditch effort, I thought, oh, well, like, let's just reamp it, because, I mean, I have all the technology to do that. So the easy way didn't work. Let's try the slightly more time-consuming way. And I actually use my Splawn Nitro, which is I've got such a love-hate relationship with that amp, and I'm in the love phase right now. And managed to dial it in, and the client really liked the sound. And yeah, it was funny because I liked the sound as well. I thought it sounded really good. And I thought, you know what, maybe I'll just capture this sound and we'll just kind of have it in the computer for future reference. I'm mixing an album with this band, in the future, so like over the next sort of like few months, so I can bring up that sound and use it at any time, and that's really convenient. I did obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but for my own benefit, I A/B'd the two. So I have the reamped guitar track, I have the DI track like as one sound in my Pro Tools session, and then I also have the DI track with the ToneX plugin of the amp, and it's basically the same. I mean, it's so close, awesome. And we're past that. Like, I mean, we're past even that being a conversation point. Like, how close does it sound? It's the same. Like, it's completely usable and sounds great.
It's rad.
So to get back to it, I mean, specifically with me, I made a lot of profiles sort of 6 months ago. I was hoping to have this all finished before now, but last week, and having finished a few projects and having like a day or two of being able to get my brain refreshed a little bit, I'm a bit more back into this world, which is nice. So yeah, I mean, this is why not why we're talking about it now, but that's why it's certainly fresh in my brain. And it's exciting, man. Like I've got a lot of stuff and I like it. And it's sometimes just more convenient to have that on my laptop. Not always, but sometimes it is. So for my own benefit or to record projects, like, man, I made a capture of the Soldano SLO 100 like 12 months ago for a project. And I've used that quite a bit as well in certain tracks. It sounds awesome. Like it's just so convenient.
I mean, it's kind of magic, right? Because it gives you that ability, as you said. One, you've got a great amp collection, but you're often going to use those amps for certain things. You probably have your favorite settings on there and favorite combinations with different pieces of gear, like speaker cabinets, microphones, and outboard gear. The fact that you can just take those sort of favorites and snapshot them and carry them around on your laptop to use whenever you want, even if it's just for your own enjoyment, that's awesome. But the added bonus of, you dial in a killer sound for a band, they come in and do a single, they're super happy with it, you're super happy with it, you make a capture of it, and then 12 months later they come back in and they're like, hey, we want to recall that and tweak a few things, or maybe we want to record something else but with a similar kind of settings. Then you can work faster with it because you're like, cool, this is where we were last time, boom.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, there's still quirks with it. It's not a 100% perfect system, but it's really usable. And I have a thing where with the neural amp stuff, I haven't investigated that just yet. And that's something that I will be doing soon. And also, I'm not certain. So you mentioned like the Mua one and the Headrush and all that. How are they their own ecosystem to make captures, or do they work with other?
Yes.
Right.
So they're proprietary format.
Can you do captures with the units themselves, or how do you? Are they just ones?
Yes. So the Mua one, the GS1000, it's got a mic preamp on it, touchscreen. It's kind of like a mini quad Cortex.
Right.
And it will do all the capturing on the device. The captures that I made with it, I thought sounded pretty close to the references as well, which is it's probably a separate discussion, but like you can see where people are going to be trading off maybe. Hey, what if it's 10% less accurate, but it's 30% more affordable money-wise with a lot of these things?
Yep.
So I reckon within the next 3 to 4 years, you're going to be able to have amazing sounding, highly accurate stuff at, probably sub $150 price points.
Man.
I mean, what's a ToneX 1? Somewhere around there.
Like $300-400 Australian or something. It's nothing. I mean, you can't capture that, but the I guess the software. I mean, as I said to you, man, like the software, that whole part of the ecosystem. Like I have the pieces to do it already. Like if I didn't, it would be a few $100 barrier of entry to get into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just the software that you need to use. Whereas I was maybe not put off, but I never really investigated the Kemper side of stuff because I didn't want to buy the unit. Also, like pre the rack mount version, I found the lunchbox like kind of an awkward thing to work out where I was going to put it because it's just, and it's maybe a me problem. And yeah, the Quad Cortex too, like when that launched without the editor, the computer editor, like I used it and it sounded really good. But they're all quite expensive to just get into it. And if you don't like it, then you kind of, stuck having to sell it. So yeah, at least with the ToneX, I think I bought the software for very little. It was only $100 or something, I reckon. And then all of the other hardware is stuff they have. So it was really easy.
And with ToneX, obviously, you're using your computer to do all the, back-end capture style stuff, whereas something like the QC, something like the Mua, the Headrush units, the bigger ones you can capture on them, but they've also got, it's because InMusic owns Headrush and they own PV and they don't own PV, take that out. They own Revalver, software, which is previously owned by PV, and Revalver has an amp cloner now, so you can do ToneX style stuff on your computer. It's actually got a way to like capture plugins as well, like within the app. So if you want to like capture a neural DSP plugin, it's an all automated thing. You don't even need an outboard interface to do it, which is kind of cool.
That's cool.
And I've done videos on that, done videos on the Mua. Hot Tone have added capturing to the Ampero, which is pretty cool. So yeah, it's sort of like it's all happening with that sort of thing. I guess the two main categories are doing the capture-based stuff on the unit. So the Kemper started that.
Yep.
And then using software to do everything. And I guess ToneX was kind of the first to market in that regard, where it's like, hey, we've got this integrated suite that's a plugin and it will capture a profile. Was it? Because like Overloud THU was doing stuff.
You couldn't capture your own with Overloud. You could use their they had an element of that in their software, but you couldn't put your own in there, unfortunately. That was a real
whether
bummer.
It was first or not. I feel like the ToneX thing was a changed the market.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's a plugin that does capturing, and you do it all there.
Yeah, I was really excited when that came out, and I didn't. I think I had some issues getting it to work initially, and it's because my setup in my studio is quite complicated. Just because of the interface that I have, which is the Avid Matrix Studio. The way, without getting like too nerdy with this stuff, but like using an HDX sort of, or whatever, like DigiLink interface just means like you get locked out of certain things. So I've got this interface that costs like $7,000, but part of that is I can have Pro Tools open or I can play YouTube videos, but I can't have both happen at the same time. So that's a quirk that's always happened. Like if I close Pro Tools down, all of a sudden I can play audio, but the way around that. And for the people that don't use like Pro Tools or Avid and that sort of stuff, that sounds ridiculous, but it's just a reality of it. So I had to buy the Dante virtual sound card because my interface has Dante built into it.
Right, yeah.
And I have a separate Ethernet port on the back of my Mac Mini or adapter, which Ethernets into the back of the Matrix Studio, and that's how I send audio back and forth. But that cost $70 for a license just so I could play computer audio, which is kind of silly, but that was how I had to deal with it. However, it did actually open up. Well, yeah, there's one aspect to how I do my capture and how I have been doing my captures, which is like maybe a little bit unique, which I'll talk about in 2 seconds. But just before that, the whole setup requires like a lot of virtually routing audio to different places.
Yeah, right.
And it's all completely, it all makes sense, but you have to either do it a lot or have done it a lot for it to immediately make sense. And there's a lot of head scratching on my end if I don't look at the software for like, a month or 3 or 6 months or whatever. And it happened literally weeks ago where I looked at the thing and went, how did I set this up? Like, all right, I've got to go back through the whole chain. Thankfully, signal flow for me is okay, but it takes a minute, but I can do it. But the way that I'm doing my captures, so I can talk about the signal flow really quick, but
before we do that, the other thing that is worth mentioning as well, obviously ToneX came to market, but not long after that, you had Neural Amp Modeler, which is like an open source. It was someone's just little passion project that they released, and it sounds amazing. Like it works so great. The plugin is free. Lots of people are now using Neural Amp Modeler to build other products. There's hardware solutions out there like the NAM player and stuff like that.
Well, in 2 Notes as well,
that's
isn't it?
That whole ecosystem.
I think the 2 Notes Opus has that. I think it can play.
I think you can load up. Yeah, you can load up NAM profiles in the software. I'm not 100% sure about in the Opus because they take quite a lot to run. They're processor heavy, but that's a whole thing. And so talk us through that, because then I want to talk about like input levels and gain staging, which has been a hot topic as well.
I think like with the NAM, that concept, and I mean to like ToneX as would be another one, but probably the unfortunate thing is like it sucks when there's so many different formats to do the same thing and nothing talks to each other. It would be if like just take NAM as like an example, being that is the open source version, but if every one of these boxes effectively worked on what like a NAM file was, it would make life significantly easier for everybody. So, I mean, I don't know how these things work at other levels in terms of like, intellectual property and whatnot, but it would probably, in a perfect scenario, just having the file and then the player that is made per developer, that would be a lot better. And, you load your NAM profile into a unit, but you still have individual effects, like I know, for example, the Hotone like Ampero stuff, the effects in that are really great. So it's like you still have that, but just you've got your amp profile in there that does that part of it too.
Yeah,
that would be better. But anyway, in terms of my setup and how I run things, so the biggest problem with the ToneX, which I think is not exclusive to ToneX, but certainly one of its biggest drawbacks, is it takes a long time to do the machine learning side. And you've made ToneX profiles before. So
we have.
On a standard Mac, well, okay, just to start again, if you have a computer that doesn't have an NVIDIA graphics card in it, things take significantly longer, like stupid amounts of time longer.
Yeah.
Because that's how it's been developed. And that's how they did it, and that's completely fine. So I run a Mac Mini with a normal whatever graphics card is in that computer, and a stand or whatever the default setting is in ToneX there. It might take like 30 to 40 minutes to make one profile, which is quite a long time.
Yep,
and that's not
right.
that's not the best quality version of it. That's just like that one. Whereas to do an advanced capture, you're talking like hours and hours and hours to make one sound. So just the time investment where you're not even like, it's just working in the background. Like you can still use your computer and stuff, but if you want to make like, I don't know, like a couple dozen captures with that setup, it's going to take you like days and days, like just actual days and days. Whereas I know with like Kemper, it's like 10 minutes or something, or 15 minutes to do a profile. It's significantly faster. Like a lot of those.
Yeah, and they're obviously using different profiling methods. Like there's no machine learning or training happening with the Kemper.
Absolutely.
The Cortex claims that it's doing machine learning.
Look, if it is, or I don't.
Look, I'm not going to say it's not, but it's highly unlikely that it's doing what ToneX is doing, given the processing power and how long it takes. Right?
Sure. Well, maybe. I don't know the specifics of it, to be honest. So
it still sounds good.
It sounds great. Yeah, but I mean, like that's a drawback to that system. You know, like the time that it takes. So, being that I'm a Mac user, which I've been a Mac user for like almost 15 years because of Pro Tools and the audio equipment and. Not another thing that's not worth having an argument about. Like, I just don't want to use a PC because I have Macs.
Exactly.
Like, it's the end. Every studio I've ever worked in has been on Macs, so the end. So I got around that I built a secondary PC. By built, I mean Jay, friend and listener of the show.
Mad Dog.
Had a spare like i7 computer that was a couple of years old just sitting in his house that he wasn't using. So he said, hey man, if you want to borrow the computer for a bit, that's completely cool. So I did. And I went and bought a moderately priced NVIDIA graphics card. I actually bought two. The first one was, let's just say it was $100, $150. And then I found another better one that was like $300 or something. So I just ended up swapping them out. But what it allowed me to do is I'm doing all my ToneX captures on a different computer. I'm using Dante, which for those of you that aren't aware, Dante is network audio stuff. So I'm able to use my same converters, my same studio converters, and I'm able to Dante the audio out of that through Ethernet into the Ethernet port of a PC that's in a different room because it's got quite a loud fan in it. It takes up too much space in the studio and it's too loud. So that is sending audio either way into that computer, and then I use remote desktop on my Mac just to be able to access that computer to do the capture process. So it's
clever.
In doing that, and is it worth it? Well, to do a default capture is like 4 minutes versus like 30 to 40 minutes, and doing an advanced capture rather than taking like several hours takes about 20 minutes. So I can do in the space what would take like a day to do one capture, I can do like 10. And so that's quite significant. But that's great for me, and I was able to set that up. I had a lot of the equipment already to be able to set up a situation like that, where if you're doing it from scratch, it might be a bit more difficult. But yeah, man, like that's kind of how I've done it. And if you're not willing to go to PC like top to bottom to do this sort of stuff, it can be quite a difficult operation.
Then it's pain.
It's pain and suffering. So, I mean, that's the thing with the ToneX, man. It takes a while to make a profile, even with this setup that I have. And I think allegedly you can use better graphics cards, more expensive graphics cards. I didn't want to like blow out and spend thousands and thousands of dollars on something just in case it gave me an extra 5 minutes. So spending a few $100, I was happy to try that and happy to say it worked as well, which is awesome. And
basically factor of 10.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of speed.
So that's all. That's basically how I run stuff. And then, yeah, in terms of the rest of my setup as well, just in case anyone's wondering, and what I'm going to do, and I need to just, I always say I'm going to do stuff and never do it, but when all this launches, I'll do a video describing the signal flow of how this works, in case anyone's interested. But
yeah, dog.
I'm able to use my Matrix Studio audio interface to send signal out to my reamp device. So all of the captures that I did were done with the Little Labs Ready 3D, Red Eye 3D, whatever it's called.
Yep.
I've since upgraded to the Undertone Audio GB tracker, but I didn't have that when I did Get Noise profiles. But that sends signal into my KHE amp selector, which allows me to obviously select whichever amp I want to do. I'll put boost pedals in front of the amp, like out of the reamp box into that and then into the switcher if I want to try something like that. I've got a bunch of profiles where, you want a tube screamer in front of an amp. Like that's just a sound that everyone is familiar with. Yeah. So I'll do that. And then to do all these captures, using the KHE amp selector, there's a loop in that where you can put an attenuator. Sick. So at the time I was using the 2Notes Torpedo Reload as the attenuator, as an attenuator for general purpose reasons. But that also has an XLR output. So I'm through that device, like I can use it, like just use it for a load box and get an amp only capture to put impulse responses on afterwards. So the way that I have put together my captures is I basically did dual captures of every sound, because we spoke about this, I reckon, like 6 or 7 years ago, when it came to like recording, like maybe making impulse responses, but trying to dial them in according to like a guitar sound, rather than just put a mic in a position and hope it sounds okay and getting like a million captures, like doing it sort of musically how you would do it. And so I kind of did that with these guitar sounds as well. I often use the default settings, because at the bottom of ToneX, you can play out just like demo audio, which is so useful because that plays out, and then I can use one of like a few dozen sounds, like DI tracks, to play out and then twist the knobs without having to play guitar at the same time. And there's a few specific ones that I like using and that I've made a lot of notes in terms of which ones I used. But basically I used that, and I mic'd a cabinet in the other room, 3 cabinets actually, depending on the capture, and dialed in the sound according to that. So what I've got in my packs is each amp. So take the Mesa Boogie Stiletto, I did one of that. I ran that into my Vintage 30 loaded Marshall cabinet, and it's been mic'd up. Like that's how the sounds have been created. And then I've taken a capture with the head, the cabinet, and a pedal as well, if it was in the signal chain. And then, in case you don't like that sound, I've also got the head-only version as its own capture, so you can add your own impulse response on. And then I also took impulse responses of the cabinet, so that if you want to use that cabinet with a different head-only, you can do that too. And also the impulse responses that I made, because we spoke about that probably on this a few, like 6 months ago or 9 months ago or something. Yep. So I made different blends of the 2 mics. So it's an SM57 and a Royer 121, which are 2 mics that I'm really comfortable with and like know how they sound. So I found the best spot for, I believe, the SM57 using the Dynamount. So I could drive the mic into the best spot and listen to it really carefully and get that happening. And then I went in and used the, like, actually old school, move the Royer mic to where I thought, firstly, it should be placed, and secondly, so I had the best possible phase with the Dynamount and got them perfectly phase aligned. And then that's how all the cabs were captured. So it's blended before it gets into the computer, and it's blended in the Matrix Studio actually. So it's still digitally blended, but
interesting.
It's just I created that sound with all that in mind, and that's what's in each capture. But again, if you don't like that, there's a head-only version. You can use your own.
That's great. How have you gone with input levels in ToneX before we go any further, because there's like been lots of discussion around this with plugins and captures and like, you know, basically where you set the input gain of your interface and where you set the internal gain. There's people who've put together quite comprehensive lists of like, if you've got this interface, use these settings, but then ToneX is like a little bit opaque about that.
Right. Yeah, I think the only level control that really matters with the way that I'm doing it is with the mic input coming into ToneX. So it's basically, it's like, it's a reamp signal coming out of the computer. That's all been like aligned to its best possible signal, and you can hear what the amp sounds like, right? So, okay, let me start again. In terms of signal chain, the signal starts at the ToneX software, and that's pumping out its like blips and blops in its guitar signal, right? That's going line level out into some sort of reamp device, whatever that is. And then that's going into the front of your amp, right? So between like the line output, like the level coming out of your computer and the input of the amp, like that is variable depending on the device that you're using. So I aligned mine just with the software there, and pumped it into the input. But if the drive in the amp, like if you're going for like a heavy metal distorted sound and it's really clean, you're going to hear that. It's not going to sound right. So like you firstly can use your ears and adjust accordingly, which in some respects is kind of like the same way you would just adjust like the guitar volume on your guitar, you know, like that. It's a similar sort of thing, like coming into the front of the amp in terms of the amount of gain required. Obviously you're not clipping coming out of the interface. It's all clean level. So as long as that part of it is not too loud and like distorting, which I think it can, but you know, certainly it wasn't in my case. You can get relatively clean signal coming in. So yeah, the amount of drive, the amount of distortion, the amount of compression or whatever that is created by the amp is all pretty much like tick. It's easy, and you're judging that by the playing that either you're doing live or the ToneX demos, as I'm saying. Like I think Rider is one of the demos that you can use. So that's a specific riff, and I know how that's going to sound when it comes out. And yeah, if it sounds really clean or it sounds like overly distorted on a cleaner amp, it's like, well, that sounds pretty shit. But I don't touch those levels like from that end. Once it's been set, it's basically set. And I didn't touch that the whole time. I think it's coming out plus, I don't want to say actually, because I don't want to give the wrong information out. Jason Sadites, I think his name is, he did a really interesting video talking about like using a multimeter to check and a sine wave tone coming out of your interface to check the actual voltage coming out of the output, and using that to align, basically your outputs of your interface, which is quite interesting, worth checking out. So shout out to him. I
think there was some other people that was there. I think he's just sort of picked up information that's out there on the web. There's a very good thread called Calibrating Input Level for Plugins on the Gear forum that I'd point people towards.
Yeah.
It's like worth reading and understanding as well.
Because I'd say, okay, like I'll come back to that in a second, but like after that, you know, you're going out of your amp and you're miking that up somehow, and that is mostly just normal practice of recording levels, right? Like you're not going to drive your
and then the rest is gravy.
And inside the software, like it is, you said it's opaque, and it's just not super, like it's somewhat dumbed down in the sense that like there's like a 4 bars of like the optimal recording level that you should set to, which it doesn't really say what that is. It just is like, if it is red, it's probably too loud, and if it's like in the gray section or whatever, what color it is, it's too quiet, and then you just adjust it in the middle. It doesn't seem to make a huge difference. Like as long as it's in that range, it seems to be like reasonably good. So I'd aim for just below red is how I come into it. The other side of it, so like that's the capture process, but the other side that where I think it's probably more important is like when you're recording with it, if like you're playing live and you're using the plugin, where you're going to set the gain on your audio interface.
Yeah.
So that is another sort of thing that is worth taking into consideration, depending on like how you're applying the capture. But to me, that's independent of the capture. You know what I mean? Because none of that side of it.
It's funny because
Go on.
I was going to say with Amplitude is kind of famous for the models being like severely undergained, where some of them sound really, really bad, and then you crank up the input level and it's like, oh, yeah, now that sounds like a JCM 800 or something like that.
Yep.
I guess with your setup as well, you've got the advantage of being able to play your guitar through the reference amp and then play through the capture and A/B them immediately.
Yeah.
Most capture devices have like a refinement thing as well, where you sort of you play some guitar and get all that happening.
Yep.
I feel like with Neural Amp Modeler, you can. I know now, like they've got their own test tone and training thing,
right?
But you can also because it's open source, someone's figured out it's like if you've got a recorded track and a DI that you've made from a session 15 years ago, you can train the model on that, which is super cool.
Right.
Like you don't need to use. So that's that would be well worth investigating because it's. I mean, you could go back to say Ragdoll back to 0 from 2016 and make a NAM profile of what we did there.
Which is really pretty cool, actually. I didn't know that was a possibility. So,
I mean, if there's DIs and stems for stuff going back, however far you want, if you can get those stems, and you can make amp models out of them.
Yeah,
cool.
It is cool. Like the neural amp modeler. I know the training time is significantly less as well because you upload that, don't you?
There's you can do it natively or you can do it. There's a couple of different ways to do it. Yeah, you can use basically the Google.
That's right.
Whatever it's called, workspace or something. But then other people have come out with like free solutions where you can you're basically renting time on an NVIDIA graphics card or something. So
Well, that's awesome. And really like it's with all that stuff is if you've got the time to make the profile and go through the pain and suffering of it and testing it, then that's awesome. For me, like when I do my sounds, really it's like I test the because there's the compare function within within the ToneX as well, so I can replay the sound through the cabinet and then through the profile to check them. And I mean, they always sound the same. Like, there's probably going to be one time when I've needed to add extra gain onto it. Like, there is a control for extra gain, and otherwise, it always sounds pretty good. The only problem with that is if you're doing an amp-only capture, like you're not really hearing it in context. That you can't import an impulse response into the checking phase, like the A/Bing like phase.
Yeah.
So if you're going to compare the like DI'd guitar signal of a cranked Mesa Boogie to the like the ToneX profile of a cranked Mesa Boogie without a cabinet, like they're going to sound the same, but they're both going to sound shit. So it's kind of not the ultimate solution. But yeah, anyway, like that's in terms of like the gain setting and all that. It's really important. I mean, it's probably once I set stuff up, I didn't really think of it too much after that. Particularly if you're using analog gear digital gear that doesn't have the ability to drift like in the same way that an analog piece of gear does. It's basically going to be mostly the same. And man, it's weird. Like I don't know. I don't know some of these people. The Jason Sadik's guy that I mentioned. Like I've listened to some of his stuff and they sound really good. Like his guitar sounds really good. Some of the other people I'm a little unclear on. But there's like I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, but man, there's some really like awful guitar sounds out there. It's on all these platforms. Mate, Uncle Leon, the absolute worst of the lot. But it's funny, man. Like
it's never been easier to sound so shit.
Well, the tricky thing is, like it's like with recording. This is like I don't want to take too much time up when I talk about this, but when it comes to recording anything, right? You've got just so many variables. You've got microphones in cables or guitar picks or amps and cabinets and plugins and mic preamps and converters and all stuff. Like there's so many places at which the sound can change, right? And it may only be like 0.1%, but then you start to add those up and things can sound really different, Mic positioning can be an infinite way of making things sound good or bad. And the same as like, I mean, you might be recording in an environment that's really echoey versus one that's really dead. That's going to give you a different tone, even if using the same equipment, right? So this is the thing where it's like, if you're like Gearspace is a place that I don't visit so much anymore because I came to realize the people that were talking up the most were the people that also either never did anything, like never did any work as a recording engineer, or they just don't know what they're doing, or they don't have ears that work. Like I would hear the stuff they did and I was like, oh, it doesn't sound right to me. So
mate, the life cycle of a forum is as follows. It starts and you have some like OGs and it's kind of fun. And then a bunch of people, then it hits like a golden period where you're like, this is kind of cool. Mm-hmm. Maybe you have some disagreements, the culture builds around it. And then you just get a bunch of like the people with the loudest voices just start to dominate it. And then someone starts posting threads about big titties. And then it's all fucking downhill from there.
Yep.
Like that's every Facebook group, every forum, when like a bunch of middle-aged dudes are like, oh, I just thought we'd like put a thread on here about racks. Then you're like, okay, cool, time to move somewhere else. What happens after that is then you start getting all the YouTuber spam where it's like, hi guys, here's my video comparing 52 different capture devices to the real amp. What do you think? And they post that everywhere, So just they all inevitably become spam farms. Yep. But there's always a useful period, right before the lunatics take over the asylum.
As I said, man, like this is like I'm a bit wary, and I don't want to again throw anyone under the bus about like their knowledge being incorrect because I don't know who any of these people are or what they're Well, I haven't read these threads, but there's like when there's so many variables, in my experience, people get hung up on one thing of it. And so an example of that is, I might have mentioned it on here, hearing about someone that was so obsessed that mic cables were ruining his sound that he found a mic, it was a small diaphragm condenser. His is an SM57, but it was, had a smaller XLR surrounding there that he could plug directly in the back of a mic preamp. And when he performed, he would hold the mic pre in front of him because that was the best, there was no copper in between. So it's like you can do that, right? You'll eliminate the stat part of it. But then, is that mic the best choice to record your vocal or is that the best preamp? And like, everybody gets hung up on these little things. So when it comes to the signal coming out, it's like everything else, it makes a difference. But is 1 dB here versus 1 dB there going to make a difference? Like on your amp, is it the difference between setting it at 12 o'clock or 12 like 05? Because that could be it, So again, it's not to say it's not nothing, but and especially when it's the guitar signal going into a computer, that's where another whole bunch of stuff can happen. Like if you're, recording into hot, and I mean, generally speaking, people make that mistake all the time anyway, where they record so hot it starts to distort, and they drums are the same, and you don't, oftentimes need to be like in the close to the red every time you put a mic on something. So but that's a that's like a gain structure thing that also extends into the general knowledge of audio, which a lot of people don't have that or don't have the interest in it. It's not as sexy as like buying a new Marshall, which is so sexy. But yeah, with the other devices, like, so if you're working on an enclosed system, like just take a Kemper or a Neural. We'll take Neural. You do have to adjust the gain on that, don't you? But I feel like they give you a range that is optimal or something. They give you an indication of where it's
There's often
accurate.
like, make sure you're hitting 0 or -6 or something like that. The other thing with Neural, obviously, is if you want to like share or sell your captures, it's like a closed system.
Yep.
They've got their cloud, it's versus like the Kemper, you just back up your files, send them to people. ToneX, same thing. You can export the presets. So I actually don't know how people are selling commercial quad Cortex profiles.
I think I looked into it briefly, but I think it is a slightly more complicated thing where you got to log into people's accounts and something weird about it. But,
which sounds like a pain in the ass.
What I was going to say is like something that's interesting about, say, like AxeFX, because like there isn't an input control on that, is there? Like with line 6, there's a pad, there's a 20 dB pad, but that's pretty much all you get.
Yep.
So Fractal's the same, is that right? Or not so much with a pad, but like it just, how does that work? Because I can't remember. I'm sure we've discussed it, but
yes. So to be clear, I can actually bring it up right here because I have an AxeFX right by my knee if you go to the I/O section. So you can change the sensitivity of the input AD converter,
Right.
which basically is going to optimize signal to noise. And there's also a separate for the main input one, something called input one gain, which is going to then add or subtract gain, like flat level to whatever that is. So a lot of people get those confused because, yeah, it's like if you set, I have the input one at like 12% or something, so that, and there's a little clip indicator, which doesn't mean that you're hitting 0 dB and clipping the thing. It's just like, hey, stay out of this range and you'll be safe. It's sort of, but then everything else happens internally. Like, there's analog input circuitry on there for your guitar. And then, yeah, it's a DSP based hardware solution. So all that stuff's taken care of. Whereas with software, they don't know what interface you're using. You might be using, a top of the line RME, or you might be using a Focusrite 2i2, so that's where knowing your interface, calibrating that to the plugin, getting the input levels right is really important.
Yeah. It's confusing, man. Like if you take a...
Oh, absolutely.
Like
if you just want to play like Judas Priest riffs, you don't want to have time to think about this shit. Yeah, but it is important.
But there's scenarios whereby, if you're on your guitar rig, because if you've got a full analog pedal board, and just for the sake of it, just say it's all analog, and you've got like a tube screamer on there, and you've got a HM2 on there or something as well, right? You turn stuff up and it starts to distort, but that distortion is not unpleasant. The amount of like actual voltage caused with the amount of amplification involved with that is going to go up and up and up, but it's like, it's not going to be like clipping something in a way that is, not that it's not unpleasant, but when you go into digital, like a computer or something like that, it lops it off hard and it sounds like pretty nasty, right? So there's a section of the guitar community that we've all met these people, right? It's like you walk up to a Marshall and you set the knobs because like, oh, I always have my bass at 5 or whatever. And that's the way they do it. And it's like, you look at their pedal boards and it's like, well, I always have my output set to 4 o'clock or something because that's the way it sounds the best. And it's like, might sound great. Maybe that sounds great in front of your Fender Twin, but you're going to run that into like a ToneX pedal, or you're going to run into your Axe Effects or into your computer. And you may do that. Not everybody will do this, of course, but you may do that. And then you're just clipping the shit out of the input, and you may not know that you should turn the input gain down because maybe that's where you've set it for another piece of gear. There's like all these points along the signal chain where you can increase the volume of something or decrease it. Again, this is gain structure, which is like a foundational aspect of audio, which is what I teach all the time and things that I think about and discuss with people all the time. It's missing from the general knowledge of a lot of what us guitar players have because it's really fucking boring.
Hence when it doesn't work bad.
Yeah, and people get up in arms about it. It's like, you can follow the general operational principles. Well, look, this is why there was a barrier of entry for a long period of time where like having a bit of knowledge, like having a bit of knowledge was kind of useful and important. And now that doesn't, like, it shouldn't exist. We shouldn't be gatekeeping people out of this industry, but like, man, it takes a little while. Like even though some of these concepts are relatively simple, like they take a little while to understand, and that sucks. Yep. So yeah, but look, I don't know. Like people can still get great tones.
Time you could be spent playing your fucking guitar.
Yeah, I think that to finish off my point from before, like some of the profiles that because I've gone through the cloud and demoed a few things, and there's some in there that are really great. There are some that are less great, and I don't know who makes these things. I've watched YouTube videos of people making these tones as well, and they're like, the gear aside, like, because even like a Focusrite 2i2, whatever you mentioned before, a cheap audio interface and an SM57, there's no reason you can't make a good like amp capture. There's no reason you can't make an album with that gear. It's completely fine. But if
people have done it and will continue to do it.
But if you've put the mic like on the other side of the room where there's a lot of noise and hiss, and you've like, you haven't put any acoustic treatment around and everything's really echoey, it's just not going to sound right. It's going to sound really weird, and the profile isn't going to be fucking worth using. Like that's the reality of it. under certain a lot of circumstances it won't be. Maybe it will be great for certain parts too, but at least I'm not saying this to talk my own stuff up, but at least I know the way I've captured it is the way that I record normal guitars when people come and say, "Hey Troy, here's a bunch of money to record my album." You know what I mean? It's like treated room, good mics, good preamps. For anyone that's interested, a Vetus MA5 and a JLM TG500 is what I've used on the for the mic preamps into the Avid converters, which are made by DAD. It's all like quality stuff, and if you use good stuff and you know what you're doing, it should turn out good. as easy as that.
It's kind of like, I feel like, with the difference between audio, like studio stuff a lot of the time, and guitar stuff is like, with guitar, we're obsessed with the ingredients that go in, Whereas a lot of the time in the studio, you want to have it's how you're processing the ingredients, and you want to make sure that you're not infesting them with salmonella or, having burning them too. There's all these kind of, that's what it would be in terms of a commercial kitchen,
Yep.
It's, obviously, if you've got a hell good chef and you got a clean workspace and good ingredients, the product's going to be fantastic. But if you've got an idiot who doesn't know how to cook with great ingredients and a really nice clean workspace, it's still not going to be great.
Yeah. I mean, you can still you could give an idiot a Wagyu A5 and they can still make it sound fine or taste fine, sound fine. Or they might cook,
or both, just slap it.
Or no, more specifically, you take a several $100 piece of steak and you cook the shit out of it, and it's still going to taste good because it's a really good piece of meat. So the equivalent being you could put someone in, give them a dumble and make them make a capture. It's probably going to sound fine, but it's not going to sound the same as if you got a bit of experience. And experience isn't necessarily golden years. It's understanding the parts we're talking about, signal flow and gain structure and level, all this sort of stuff. That is so important to this, and as guitar and pro audio and all these, as everything converges into one thing now, it's sort of useful to have a little bit of knowledge. So anyway, with my stuff, hopefully it's okay. Hopefully people like it. I mean, they maybe no one will buy it. That'd be sort of fine because at least it's got a lot of wicked profiles.
But good ingredients, we got 3-star Michelin Troy over here. Cool stuff, and it'll be. I think that the big thing with capturing, at first with the commercial captures, I was like, well, this is stupid because meant to be, everyone can capture stuff. But no, most people don't know what they're doing. Most captures sound terrible. So having people who actually know what's going on and paying a small amount of money for their expertise is very valuable to a lot of people. I've kind of realized that the hard way, where, if you're doing an album or you just want to have some enjoyable sounds, it's someone will be able to go and get Troy's captures, and it's you like the way his 77 Marshall sounds, here's a bunch of captures with the cabs, the way Troy uses it, the way that you've heard it, and then you can imprint your own DNA all across that.
It's just a good easy platform, and bing bang boom, happy days.
Mate, so anything else you want to add to that, because we've been waffling on about capturing. It's
good.
It's pretty, the longer it goes on, sort of the more, I feel like the more there is to talk about, the more nuanced, the more it interests me.
It's fun, man. I mean, that's the other part. It's the unfortunate part of everything we do. It's it's fun. That's why we got into it.
Yeah.
And learning is fun. Hang on, here we go. It's been an hour. Well, look, mate, let me tell you something. We started this podcast. We started the podcast. I didn't know how his day went. I've received a message. It was 6 minutes ago. He's great, super happy. Well, there you go. So,
well, Troy, I don't think we can get any better than that on this podcast. So we should just leave it and pick it up next time.
Hammer Space Recording, ladies and gentlemen. That's the name of the studio. That's the name of the profiles and the captures. So keep an eye out for that. You can like the Instagram page, Hammer Space Recording, and you'll see a logo with a purple logo made by Mrs. Leon Todd, Elspeth Todd, as you may know her.
Yep.
And
she done good.
And she finally got paid for work that was done 7 years ago. So that's good for everybody. And hopefully you like the sounds. I might put a couple up for free as well, either on the Tone thing, or even
get some free stuff from Troy.
Yeah, I'll put even something up here if we want to just send a link to that. So yeah, happy days. Cool bananas, mate. Well, I will see you next week. Hey, good luck with the circus.
Bloody great week, mate.
All right,
I'll do my best.
Peace out, mate. Take it easy. Bye, everyone. Cool.